My name is Ophelia Grant, and for 7 years I believed that respecting my daughter-in-law's boundaries was the best way to keep peace in our family. I was wrong about one thing: sometimes giving someone space doesn't create peace. Sometimes it only gives them more room to misunderstand you. My son Darren married Meredith when they were both in their late 20s. I remember the first time I met her. She was confident, intelligent, and extremely independent. She had strong opinions about everything: how the house should look, how Darren should spend his weekends, how they should raise their future children, and especially how much involvement parents should have in a married couple's life. I understood her. I had been married once myself. I knew what it felt like to have someone constantly giving you advice when you were trying to build your own life. So from the very beginning, I made a decision. I would never become the mother-in-law who showed up without calling. I would never tell Meredith how to cook. I would never criticize the way she raised her children, and I would never interfere in their marriage unless Darren specifically asked for help. At first, Meredith seemed to appreciate that. Whenever I visited, she welcomed me. Whenever I brought food, she thanked me. Whenever I offered to babysit, she seemed grateful. Every Sunday I used to visit my grandchildren. Those Sundays became my favorite part of the week. I would bring small gifts for the children. Sometimes we would bake cookies. Sometimes I would simply sit on the sofa and listen to them tell me about school. But gradually Meredith began asking for more distance. One Sunday afternoon she approached me while Darren was putting the children to bed. "Ophelia, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Would you mind if we reduced your visits?" I smiled. "Much, maybe twice a month." I nodded. "That's fine." She looked surprised that I didn't argue. A few months later, she asked me not to come over without calling first. Again, I agreed. Then she stopped wanting me to pick up the children from school. Then she started declining invitations to dinner. I never complained. I kept telling myself that this was what respecting boundaries looked like. Then one Thursday morning, Darren called me. "Mom, can you do me a favor?" "Of course. Meredith and I are leaving town for 4 days. Could you stay at the house for a couple of days? The kids might need something, and there are some documents I need picked up." I still had a spare key. Darren had given it to me years earlier. He had told me to keep it for emergencies. Before they left, he even hugged me. "Mom, make yourself comfortable." I smiled. "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." First 2 days passed without any problems. Then on the third afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Meredith. "Don't come to the house." I stared at it. I thought maybe she had sent it by mistake. So "Everything okay?" There was no response. I waited. An hour passed, nothing. The next morning, Darren called and asked me to pick up some important documents from the house. So I drove over. I parked outside. I walked toward the front door. I pulled the spare key from my purse. I put it into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. At first, I thought the key had broken. Then I looked closely. The entire lock had been replaced. I stood there for several seconds. I couldn't move. I tried calling Darren. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then my phone buzzed. It was Meredith. "You are no longer welcome here. Don't try to enter." I read that sentence 3 times. I wasn't angry, not immediately. I was hurt, deeply hurt, because for 7 years I had done exactly what she asked. She wanted privacy. I gave her privacy. She wanted fewer visits. I reduced my visits. She didn't want unexpected calls. I stopped calling. She didn't want me involved. I stayed out of their marriage. And now, without even speaking to me, she had changed the locks. I drove home. I didn't call her. I didn't send an angry message. I didn't tell the rest of the family. I simply sat in my kitchen and stared at my phone. Then I remembered something Meredith probably didn't know. Years earlier, when Darren and Meredith had purchased the house, they had struggled to come up with the down payment. Darren had come to me one evening. "Mom, we're short." "How much?" He told me. It was a lot of money, more than I could comfortably give away, but he was my son. I had savings from years of working, so I helped them. The attorney who handled the purchase had recommended placing my contribution into the property agreement. My name was listed as having a partial ownership interest. I had never mentioned it to Meredith. I didn't care about owning part of their house. It was simply protection for the money I had contributed. I had forgotten about the document until that moment. Now I called the attorney who had handled the purchase. His name was Mr. Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, I need you to check something for me." He pulled up the old property records. There was a long silence. Then he said, "Ophelia, your name is still listed. Does that mean I'm still a partial owner?" "Yes." I closed my eyes. I hadn't expected that answer. Then he asked, "Why are you asking?" I explained what had happened. There was another pause. Finally, he said, "Changing the locks doesn't automatically remove your legal interest in the property." I didn't smile. I didn't feel victorious, because this wasn't a game. I didn't want their house. I wanted my dignity. What should I do? Send a formal notice? Will that cause trouble? It could. I thought for a moment. Then I said, "Make it clear that I'm not trying to take the property." Notice was simple. It stated that my ownership interest still existed. It stated that changing the locks did not erase that interest. And it stated that I was not demanding possession of the house. I simply wanted the matter handled properly. 3 days later, Darren called. His voice sounded nervous. Mom, what did you do? I sent a letter. What kind of letter? The property attorney contacted you, didn't he? He became quiet. Yes, then you know. Why? Because Meredith changed the locks. He sighed. I didn't know she was going to do that. That sentence told me everything. Darren hadn't known. Meredith had acted alone. A few days later, Darren came to my house. He looked exhausted. He sat at the kitchen table. Mom, I'm sorry. I looked at him. What? For what Meredith did? I nodded. No, you didn't do it. He looked down at his hands. She thought you were trying to control us. No. Then why did she think that? Darren hesitated. Then he finally told me the truth. Meredith had been under enormous financial pressure. She had taken out several private loans. Some of them were connected to business expenses. Others were personal. She had been hiding the situation from Darren. And she was terrified that I would discover the old property documents and somehow use them against her. That's why she changed the locks, not because I had done something, because she was afraid. I listened quietly, then Darren said, she thought you were going to interfere while we were away. Wasn't. I know, he rubbed his face. Mom, she hasn't been herself lately. I looked at him. Fear can make people do terrible things, he nodded, but fear doesn't excuse them. Few days later, someone knocked on my front door. It was Meredith. She was standing alone. Her expression looked completely different. There was no anger, no confidence, no attitude, just exhaustion. Owe you an apology, she said. I stepped aside. Come in. She sat at the kitchen table. For several seconds she didn't speak. Then she said, I thought you were trying to take control of our home. Never wanted your home. I know that now. She looked down. I was scared. I understand. I thought if I changed the locks I could protect myself. I nodded. You hurt me. Her eyes filled with tears. I know. She took a breath. I shouldn't have done it. I should have spoken to you. She wiped her eyes. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I looked at her. Meredith, you don't have to love me. She looked surprised. You don't have to invite me over every week. She listened carefully. You don't even have to consider me your best friend. I paused. But you do have to respect me. She nodded. I will. Then I said something she clearly didn't expect. Remove my ownership interest. Her eyes widened. What if you and Darren refinance the house and return the amount I originally contributed? I'll remove my name completely. She stared at me. You would really do that? Yes. Why? Because I never wanted ownership. I smiled. I wanted my son to have a home. She began crying. I thought you wanted control. I wanted him to have a roof over his head. The refinancing process took several months. There were meetings, documents, bank approvals, legal paperwork. It wasn't simple. But eventually everything was completed. My contribution was returned. My name was removed from the property. I was no longer connected to their house in any legal way. The day the final documents were signed, I felt strangely peaceful. A week later, Darren and Meredith invited me over for dinner. I almost didn't go, not because I was angry, because I didn't know what the atmosphere would be like. When I arrived, I stood at the front door. I knocked. Meredith opened it. She smiled. Come in. I stepped inside, then she held something out to me, a key. I looked at it. What is this? The new key. I laughed softly. You don't have to give me one. I know. Then why are you? She smiled. Because you own the house. I looked at her. Then why? She said. Because you're family. For a moment I couldn't speak. I took the key, but I didn't put it in my purse immediately. I looked at it. That tiny piece of metal represented something completely different now. It wasn't ownership. It wasn't control. It wasn't power. It was trust. I hugged Meredith. She hugged me back. And for the first time in years there was no tension between us. We simply stood there, two women who had misunderstood each other for far too long. Later that evening we sat around the dinner table. Darren looked happier than I had seen him in months. The children were laughing. Meredith was telling a story. And I realized something. Changing the locks had been Meredith's attempt to push me out. It had also forced us to confront everything we had avoided for years. We finally talked about boundaries, we talked about trust, we talked about money, we talked about fear, and most importantly, we talked about respect. I never forgot the day I stood outside their house with a key that suddenly didn't work. I never forgot the message Meredith sent me. You are no longer welcome here. Those words hurt. But I also learned something from them. Sometimes people close a door because they're angry. Sometimes they close it because they're afraid. And sometimes after everything is finally understood, they open it again. But the strongest response isn't always revenge. I could have fought for the house. I could have demanded my ownership rights. I could have made Meredith regret changing those locks. Instead, I chose something different. I proved that I never wanted control. I only wanted respect. And when Meredith eventually handed me that new key, I realized something even more important. A key doesn't make you family. Ownership doesn't make you family. Blood doesn't automatically make you family. Respect does, trust does, and sometimes forgiveness does too. That day I put the new key in my purse, not because I needed access to their house, but because I knew that after 7 difficult years I finally had something better, I had a place in their lives that wasn't based on ownership, obligation, or guilt. It was based on choice.